Dr. Velix's 3 hearts nearly stopped when the human stumbled into the emergency ward with a metal beam protruding from his shoulder. Trevor Dixon was apologizing for the mess, blood pooling beneath him, asking if they could patch it quick, because he had work deadlines. The Zenthari doctor stared in horror. This injury should have killed most species, yet the Deathworlder remained conscious and concerned about his construction schedule. The medical bay doors slid open with a soft hiss, and the human walked in on his own 2 feet. Velix couldn't process what they were seeing. The metal beam was at least 3 inches wide, jutting from the front of the human's shoulder and exiting through his back. Blood soaked through his work uniform, dripping steadily onto the clean white floor. "Really sorry about this," Trevor said, his voice steady despite the pallor of his skin. "I know you folks probably have actual emergencies to deal with. This won't take long, right?" Nurse Krill, whose insectoid Vexeni species considered a cracked exoskeleton a life-threatening crisis, made a high-pitched chittering sound of pure panic. Her compound eyes reflected the overhead lights as she scrambled backward, antennae twitching wildly. "Patient requires immediate trauma intervention." Velix's crystalline hands moved quickly across the diagnostic panel. Their translator chips struggled to keep up with their rapid commands. "Prepare surgical bay 3. I need a full trauma team assembled now." Trevor shifted his weight and the beam moved slightly with him. He winced but didn't cry out. "Look, Doc, I get that it looks pretty bad. But I've been hurt worse. Remember that mining accident on Rigel Station? Human crew walked away from that one too. We're tough. Just need some stitches and maybe something for the pain." Velix's species didn't feel physical pain. Their crystalline bodies could crack or shatter, but the sensation was entirely different from what carbon-based life forms experienced. They had studied pain management extensively during medical training, understood it academically, but had never truly comprehended it. Looking at this human now, they wondered if they ever would. "Mr. Dixon, you have a foreign object penetrating through your shoulder joint. The scans are showing damage to multiple systems. You should not be conscious right now. You should not be standing." Trevor glanced down at the beam like he was noticing it for the first time. "All this?" "Yeah, caught it wrong when the support cable snapped. Tried to redirect it away from my crew. Guess I didn't move fast enough." He paused, then added, "Hey, can someone call down to Construction Bay 7? Let them know I'm okay and they should keep working on those reinforcement struts. We're already 2 days behind schedule." Nurse Krill was busy preparing the surgical equipment, but she kept glancing back at Trevor with what could only be described as horrified fascination. "The human wants to continue working," she chittered to Velix. "His cognitive function must be severely compromised." "I can hear you," Trevor said mildly. "And I'm thinking just fine. Little foggy maybe, but that's probably the blood loss talking." The medical scanner completed its full analysis, and Velix felt a wave of cold shock ripple through their crystalline structure. The results were worse than they had feared. Much worse. Fractured clavicle. 3 broken ribs on the right side. The 4th rib had a hairline fracture. 1 lung was punctured and partially collapsed. Torn muscles throughout the entire shoulder girdle. Potential damage to the cervical spine. Blood loss estimated at approximately 1.2 liters. Any Zenthari with these injuries would have been dead within minutes. A Vexeni would have gone into immediate system failure. Even the notoriously resilient Karathi people would have required months of regeneration therapy. This human was asking about work schedules. "Mr. Dixon," Velix began carefully, trying to keep their voice calm and professional. "I need you to listen to me very carefully. Your injuries are severe. Life-threatening. You have a collapsed lung. That means one of your breathing organs is not functioning properly. Do you understand?" Trevor nodded slowly. "Yeah, had that happen once before. When I was about 23. Construction accident back on Earth. They popped it back open and I was fine in a few weeks." He paused, swaying slightly. "Okay, maybe I should sit down now." Velix guided him toward the examination table, careful not to jostle the beam. Trevor moved with surprising steadiness for someone who should have been in shock. As he sat, he kept his back straight, preventing the beam from catching on anything. "The pain must be extraordinary," Velix said, preparing a sedative injection. "I'm going to give you something to help you sleep through the surgery." "No sedation," Trevor said firmly. "I don't do well with being knocked out completely. Just numb the area and give me something to take the edge off. I need to stay aware." Nurse Krill's antennae went rigid with shock. "The human refuses sedation for major surgery?" Trevor managed a weak smile. "Trust issues. Nothing personal, Doc. It's just a human thing. We don't like being completely helpless. Makes us vulnerable." I'll stay still, I promise. I've got pretty good self-control. Velix had dealt with difficult patients before, but this was beyond anything in their experience. They pulled up the human medical database, scrolling through the information quickly. What they read made their 3 hearts beat faster. Humans came from a planet classified as a Class 12 death world. Gravity 20% higher than galactic standard. Atmospheric oxygen levels that would be toxic to most species. Temperature variations that ranged from lethally cold to dangerously hot. Predators at every level of the food chain. Natural disasters that could wipe out entire regions. And humans had not just survived on this world. They had thrived. They had become the apex predator. Their bodies had adapted in remarkable ways. Redundant organ systems. Extreme pain tolerance. Rapid healing factors. The ability to function through injuries that would incapacitate other species. Their brains released chemicals during trauma that allowed them to keep moving, keep thinking, keep fighting. Your species is fascinating, Velix murmured, reading through the files. And absolutely terrifying. Trevor chuckled, then winced as the movement pulled at his injuries. Yeah, we get that a lot. Most aliens think we're either crazy or stupid. Sometimes both. Not stupid, Velix corrected. Reckless perhaps. But not stupid. They prepared the surgical tools, adjusting their approach based on what they were learning about human physiology. Mr. Dixon, I will respect your wishes regarding sedation. But I need you to understand that this will be painful. Very painful. I understand, Doc. Just do what you need to do. As Velix began the delicate work of removing the beam and repairing the damage, they couldn't help but marvel at the human's resilience. Trevor kept his word, remaining still and conscious throughout the procedure. He gripped the edge of the examination table hard enough that his knuckles turned white, but he didn't scream. Didn't thrash. Just breathed through it, steady and controlled. Nurse Krill assisted with the surgery, her movements precise despite her obvious distress at witnessing a patient endure such trauma while awake. I don't understand how this is possible, she whispered. Velix cleaned the wound carefully, watching as Trevor's blood, remarkably similar to their own crystalline fluid in function if not composition, clotted faster than expected. Neither do I, Nurse Krill. Neither do I. The surgery took 4 hours. When it was finished, Dr. Velix sealed the last layer of synthetic skin over Trevor's shoulder and stepped back from the operating table. The human's vital signs were stable, though his blood pressure remained lower than Velix would have liked. Trevor's eyes were open, focused on the ceiling panels above him. That wasn't so bad, Trevor said, his voice slightly hoarse. Nurse Krill made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a cry of disbelief. Not so bad? We just reconstructed your entire shoulder joint while you were awake. Trevor turned his head slightly to look at her. Yeah, but you did a good job. I can already feel that it's going to heal up nicely. You tried to sit up. Absolutely not. Velix pressed a crystalline hand against Trevor's chest, holding him down with surprising firmness. You will remain in bed for a minimum of 6 weeks. Your body needs time to heal. The tissue regeneration alone will take 6 weeks. Trevor's eyes widened. Doc, I can't stay in bed for 6 weeks. I've got a whole construction crew depending on me. We're building the new habitat ring, and I'm the only one who knows the full structural plan. Velix felt their frustration growing. They had saved countless lives over their career, but they had never met a patient who seemed so determined to undo their work. Mr. Dixon, your lung was punctured. Your ribs are broken. Your shoulder was nearly destroyed. If you attempt to move around too soon, you could cause permanent damage. Trevor was quiet for a moment, considering this. Then he said, how about we compromise? What if I promise to take it easy for a few days, then just do light duty? No heavy lifting, no climbing, just supervising and planning. A few days? Velix couldn't believe what they were hearing. Mr. Dixon, most species would need months to recover from what you just experienced. Yeah, but I'm not most species. Trevor said it matter-of-factly, without arrogance. Look, I know you're trying to help. I appreciate it. But humans heal fast. It's just how we're built. Velix returned to their office after ensuring Trevor was settled in the recovery ward. They pulled up the human medical database again and began reading in earnest. What they discovered over the next several hours both amazed and disturbed them. Humans were extraordinary. Their planet had tried to kill them at every turn, and they had adapted in ways that seemed almost impossible. Their bones could knit back together in weeks. Their skin regenerated rapidly. Their immune systems fought off infections that would overwhelm most other species. They had redundant organs and systems throughout their bodies, backups for their backups. But more than that, humans had evolved psychological adaptations that were just as remarkable as their physical ones. Their brains released chemicals during trauma that suppressed pain and kept them functional. They could push their bodies far beyond normal limits when they believed it was necessary. They had an almost irrational determination to keep going, to survive, to overcome. The medical files included several case studies. A human female who had walked 15 miles on a broken leg to reach help. A human male who had continued fighting despite having lost nearly half his blood volume. A human child who had survived in freezing temperatures that should have killed them within hours. Velix was still reading when Nurse Krill entered the office, her antennae twitching with agitation. "Doctor, the human is out of bed." "What?" Velix stood quickly, nearly knocking over their data pad. "It's only been 6 hours since surgery." They rushed to the recovery ward together. Trevor was indeed out of bed, standing by the window and doing slow arm rotations with his injured shoulder. He had changed out of the medical gown into a spare work uniform someone had brought him. His face was pale and drawn, but he was moving. "Mr. Dixon." Velix's voice came out sharper than they intended. "What do you think you're doing?" Trevor turned to face them, moving carefully. "Physical therapy. Got to keep the joint mobile or it'll stiffen up. Trust me, I've done this before. You had major surgery 6 hours ago." "Yeah, and the sooner I start moving, the faster I'll heal." Trevor did another slow rotation, wincing slightly. "It hurts, I'm not going to lie. But it's a good hurt. Means everything's still connected and working." Velix wanted to argue, to insist that Trevor return to bed immediately. But something in the human medical files they had been reading stopped them. The research actually supported what Trevor was saying. Humans recovered faster when they remained mobile. Bed rest for extended periods could actually slow their healing and cause additional complications. Before Velix could respond, the medical bay doors opened again. Another human entered, this one a woman with short dark hair and a blood-soaked bandage wrapped around her head. She was walking under her own power, though she moved with the careful deliberation of someone fighting dizziness. "Hey Trevor," she said, spotting him by the window. "Heard you had a little accident. You okay?" "Lucy." Trevor's face lit up with relief. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just a scratch." "What happened to you?" Lucy touched the bandage on her head gingerly. "Fell off a scaffolding platform when the cable snapped. Hit my head on the way down. It's nothing serious, just needed a few stitches." Velix examined her quickly with a handheld scanner, and their crystalline structure went rigid with alarm. "You have a severe concussion. Possible skull fracture. You walked here from the construction bay? That's over 3 miles. Lucy shrugged, then clearly regretted the movement as she swayed slightly. "Didn't seem worth calling for emergency transport. I could walk, so I walked. Besides, the fresh air helped clear my head a bit." Trevor laughed, then grabbed his shoulder as the movement pulled at his stitches. "That's humans for you, Doc. We're stubborn." Velix looked between the two humans, both of them injured in ways that should have left them immobilized, both of them standing and talking like they had merely stubbed a toe. A Zenthari with Lucy's head injury would have been in critical care for weeks. A Vexani with Trevor's shoulder damage would require months of regeneration therapy. These humans were discussing their injuries like minor inconveniences. "I need to run more tests," Velix said finally. "Both of you need to be monitored. Nurse Krill, prepare another examination room." Lucy sat down on the nearest bed without argument, which Velix took as a sign that she was more affected than she was letting on. "Sure thing, Doc. But can you make it quick? I've got a report to file about the cable failure. Safety investigation stuff." Trevor settled back onto his own bed, but Velix noticed he kept doing subtle movements with his injured arm, testing the range of motion. "Doc, I've been thinking about what you said earlier. About how we're different from other species. Maybe it would help if you understood more about how human healing works." Velix moved to Lucy's side, examining her head wound more closely. "That would be useful, yes. The medical database has information, but hearing it from an actual human perspective might provide additional insight." Trevor nodded. "Okay, so here's the thing. Humans are designed to take damage and keep going. Back on Earth, our ancestors had to hunt for food. Sometimes that meant chasing prey for hours, even days. We couldn't afford to stop just because we were tired or hurt. The ones who could push through pain, who could keep moving even when injured, those were the ones who survived to have kids." Lucy added, "And our planet is dangerous. Really dangerous. We've got weather that can kill you, animals that want to eat you, plants that are poisonous, diseases everywhere. Humans who couldn't heal fast didn't make it. So you evolved to be exceptionally resilient," Velix said, understanding beginning to dawn. Your bodies are built for survival in extreme conditions. Exactly, Trevor confirmed. Our bones are dense and strong. Our muscles can repair themselves quickly. We've got extra blood supply, so if we lose some, we don't just die immediately. Our brains can shut off pain signals when we need to focus on survival. It's all connected. Velix finished examining Lucy and administered medication for the concussion. You'll need to stay here for observation. At least overnight. Lucy made a face but didn't argue. Can I work on my report while I'm here? If you feel up to it, yes. But no screens for the first few hours. Your brain needs rest. As Velix moved between the two human patients, checking vitals and adjusting treatment protocols, they realized that everything they thought they knew about medicine was being challenged. These weren't just patients with unusual biology. These were representatives of a species that had conquered one of the harshest planets in the known galaxy. Nurse Krill approached quietly. Doctor, should we contact the Galactic Medical Council? This seems like information they would want to know about. Velix considered this. Yes. Prepare a full report on both cases. Include all scan data and my observations. If humans are going to be working throughout the galaxy, medical staff everywhere need to understand what they're dealing with. Trevor overheard this and grinned. Just remember to mention that we're not indestructible. We just really don't like giving up. 3 days after surgery, Trevor Dixon was walking the medical station corridors like he owned the place. Dr. Velix watched from their office window as the human moved past, his injured arm in a supportive sling but otherwise looking remarkably normal. This shouldn't have been possible. The surgery had been extensive. The damage catastrophic. Yet here was Trevor, not just mobile but actively helping other patients. Velix left their office to follow him, curious and concerned in equal measure. They found Trevor in the physical therapy ward, standing beside a young Rillian patient. The Rillian, an amphibious species with pale blue skin and large dark eyes, was named Sella. She had been injured in a transport accident 4 weeks ago and had refused to participate in therapy ever since. Come on, you can do this, Trevor was saying, his voice firm but encouraging. I know it hurts. But sitting here feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to make it better. Sella's translator conveyed her distress. You don't understand. The pain is too much. My people are not meant to endure such suffering. Trevor knelt down beside her recovery tank, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his shoulder. Let me tell you something about pain. 3 days ago I had a metal beam go straight through my shoulder. Broke my ribs. Punctured my lung. You know what I'm doing now? I'm walking around. I'm working. I'm living. But you are human, Sella said softly. Your species is different. You are from a death world. We Rillians are gentle. We are not built for pain. Trevor shook his head. That's not true. You're built for whatever you need to survive. Your body wants to heal. Is trying to heal right now. But you've got to meet it halfway. You've got to do the work. Velix approached quietly, not wanting to interrupt. They were fascinated by Trevor's approach. Most medical staff had been gentle with Sella, understanding of her reluctance. Trevor was being almost harsh by comparison. Yet there was something in his tone that wasn't cruel. It was the voice of someone who knew pain intimately and refused to let it win. What if I fail? Sella asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Then you fail, Trevor said simply. And then you try again tomorrow. That's how it works. You fall down, you get back up. You fail, you try again. The only real failure is giving up completely. Sella was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, she extended one of her lower limbs from the recovery tank. It trembled with effort and obvious pain. The therapy consisted of simple flexion exercises, nothing that should have been difficult for a healthy Rillian. But Sella's injuries had left her weak and frightened. Good, Trevor said, his voice warming with approval. That's good. Now hold it there for 5 seconds. You can do 5 seconds. Sella held the position, her breathing rapid and shallow. When the 5 seconds were up, she let the limb relax back into the tank. Tears rolled down her face, but there was something new in her expression. Something that looked almost like pride. See? Trevor smiled at her. You did it. Tomorrow you'll do it again and it'll be a little easier. Then a little easier after that. Before you know it, you'll be back to normal. Velix waited until Trevor moved away from Sella's tank before approaching him. That was an interesting technique, Mr. Dixon. Trevor looked slightly embarrassed. Sorry if I overstepped. I know I'm just a patient here, not staff. But I couldn't watch her just give up like that. You didn't overstep, Velix assured him. In fact, I think you may have accomplished in 5 minutes what we've been trying to do for weeks. They paused, studying the human. How are you feeling? Honestly? Trevor rolled his injured shoulder carefully. It hurts. Not going to lie about that. But it's getting better every day. The stitches pull a bit when I move wrong and my ribs ache when I breathe too deep. But I'm functional. That's what matters. You should be in bed. Resting. Doc, with all due respect, if I stayed in bed I'd go crazy. Humans aren't meant to be still. We're meant to move, to do things, to be useful. Lying around feeling sorry for myself would be worse for my recovery than walking around. Velix had to admit there was logic in that, even if it defied everything they had learned in medical school. They had been monitoring Trevor's healing closely, and the progress was remarkable. The punctured lung had reinflated fully. The broken ribs were already beginning to knit together. The shoulder joint, while still damaged, was showing signs of rapid tissue regeneration. Over the next few hours, Velix observed Trevor interact with several other patients. He had a way of connecting with them that was direct and uncompromising but somehow comforting. He didn't coddle them. He didn't pretend their situations weren't difficult. He simply refused to accept that difficulty was a reason to stop trying. By the end of the day, Sela had completed 3 full therapy sessions. Other patients who had been reluctant were beginning to participate more actively. The entire atmosphere of the recovery ward had shifted, become more energetic and hopeful. Nurse Krill found Velix in their office that evening, her antennae quivering with excitement. "Doctor, I've been documenting everything the human does. His recovery timeline, his techniques for managing pain, the way he encourages other patients. I think we could develop entirely new protocols based on his example." Velix pulled up the notes Krill had compiled. They were extensive and detailed. Human Recovery Protocols, the document was titled. It outlined Trevor's approach to healing: constant movement within safe limits, refusal to catastrophize pain, focus on incremental progress rather than perfect outcomes. "This is excellent work, Nurse Krill," Velix said. "But we need to be careful. What works for humans might not work for other species. Their pain tolerance is extraordinary. Their healing capacity is beyond normal ranges." "I understand," Krill said. "But even accounting for species differences, the psychological approach has value. The human's mindset, his determination, the way he reframes pain as temporary rather than permanent. These are lessons that could benefit any patient." Velix had to agree. They had been preparing a presentation for the Galactic Medical Conference, scheduled to take place via hologram link the following day. Trevor's case was the centerpiece. They had included full scan data, surgical records, and recovery timelines. The evidence was irrefutable, but Velix suspected many physicians would have trouble accepting it. The conference began at noon station time. Velix stood in the hologram projection chamber, their crystalline form rendered in light and transmitted to medical facilities across dozens of worlds. Hundreds of physicians from various species watched and listened as Velix presented the case. The patient sustained injuries that would be classified as catastrophic for 97% of known species, Velix explained, displaying the initial scan images. Metal beam penetration through the shoulder joint. Multiple fractured ribs. Punctured lung. Severe tissue damage. Estimated blood loss of 1.2 liters. A murmur ran through the assembled physicians. One of them, a Karathi doctor with scaled skin and multiple eyes, spoke up. "And the patient survived? How long was the recovery period?" "The patient not only survived but remained conscious throughout the initial trauma. He walked into the medical facility under his own power." Velix displayed the timeline. Surgery was performed with only local anesthesia at the patient's insistence. Recovery is ongoing, but as of day 3 post-surgery, the patient is mobile and participating in physical therapy. The murmur became an uproar. Physicians were talking over each other, some demanding to see additional evidence, others insisting this must be some kind of error. "I assure you this is accurate data," Velix said calmly. "I performed the surgery myself. I have been monitoring the patient continuously. These results are real." A Vexani physician, her voice sharp with disbelief, asked, "How is this possible? The pain alone should have induced shock. The blood loss should have caused system failure. The trauma to vital systems should have resulted in death or permanent disability." Velix brought up the comparative biology data. "The patient is human. From Earth, a Class 12 death world. Their species has evolved remarkable adaptations for survival in extreme conditions. Redundant circulatory systems. Accelerated healing factors. Neurological pain management that allows function during trauma. They are, quite simply, built differently than most species we treat." The conference continued for another hour, with Velix answering questions and providing additional documentation. Some physicians remained skeptical. Others were fascinated. All of them were forced to acknowledge that their understanding of medical limitations needed to be revised. When the conference ended, Velix returned to the recovery ward. Trevor was there, sitting with Sella and showing her pictures on his data pad. Pictures of Earth, Velix realized. Oceans and mountains and cities. Sella was asking questions, her voice animated in a way it hadn't been since her injury. Your world looks beautiful, Sella was saying. But also frightening. So much water. Such high gravity. You get used to it, Trevor said. That's the thing about humans. We adapt. No matter how hard things get, we find a way to adapt and keep going. Velix watched them for a moment longer, then returned to their office. Nurse Krill was right. There was much they could learn from humans, not just about biology but about spirit. About the refusal to give up. About the determination to heal, to help, to survive no matter what. The next morning, Velix found a message waiting from the Galactic Medical Council. They wanted to establish a dedicated research program studying human recovery methods. They wanted Trevor's case documented in full detail. They wanted to send observers to learn from him directly. Velix smiled, a gesture they had learned from spending time around humans. It seemed Trevor Dixon was about to become famous throughout the medical community, whether he wanted to be or not. The alarm went off at 0600 hours, 7 days after Trevor's surgery. Dr. Velix was in the medical bay reviewing patient charts when the emergency broadcast crackled through the station's communication system. Code read at Construction Bay 7. Structural collapse. Multiple workers trapped. All emergency personnel respond immediately. Velix's 3 hearts began beating faster. Construction Bay 7. That was Trevor's site. They grabbed their emergency medical kit and rushed toward the bay, Nurse Krill close behind them. The scene at the construction site was chaos. A massive support beam had failed, bringing down an entire section of scaffolding and temporary framework. Dust filled the air, making it difficult to see. Workers from various species were scattered around the perimeter, some injured, others calling out for their trapped colleagues. And there, in the middle of it all, was Trevor Dixon. He was wearing his work uniform, his injured arm still in its sling. But he wasn't standing back with the other evacuated workers. He was moving toward the collapsed structure, shouting orders to anyone who could hear him. No, 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 Velix whispered, moving quickly through the crowd. Mr. Dixon. Trevor. You need to stay back. Trevor either didn't hear or chose to ignore them. He was talking to Lucy, the human woman who had suffered the concussion a week earlier. She was pointing at a section of twisted metal, explaining something urgently. 3 people trapped under there, Lucy was saying. Mason and 2 Karathi workers. Mason was calling for help, but we lost contact 2 minutes ago. Trevor nodded, his face set in grim determination. Okay. The main support there is compromised, but if we can shore up that cross beam, we might be able to create a safe access point. Trevor. Velix reached him, grabbing his good arm. You cannot go in there. You're injured. You're barely a week out of major surgery. Trevor looked at Velix, and there was something in his eyes that the doctor had never seen before. Not stubbornness or defiance, but a deep, unwavering resolve. Doc, I appreciate your concern. I really do. But there are people trapped in there. My people. I'm the only one who knows the full structural layout. I'm going in. You could die, Velix said flatly. The structure is unstable. If there's another collapse while you're inside. Then I die, Trevor interrupted. But I'm not standing out here safe while my crew is trapped and dying. That's not how this works. Before Velix could respond, Trevor pulled away and began organizing the rescue effort. He moved with authority, directing workers to bring support equipment, calculating angles and stress points, determining the safest approach. His injured shoulder clearly pained him, but he worked around it, using his good arm and relying on verbal commands when physical demonstration wasn't possible. Lucy stayed at his side, following his instructions precisely. Other workers, both human and alien, responded to his leadership without question. Within minutes, they had assembled a rescue plan. I need 4 volunteers to come in with me, Trevor announced. It's going to be dangerous. I won't lie about that. The structure could shift at any moment. But we've got people in there who are counting on us. Every human worker present stepped forward. Several alien workers did as well, though Velix could see the fear in their expressions. Trevor selected a mixed team based on skills and size, choosing people who could fit through tight spaces and had structural knowledge. Mr. Dixon, please, Velix tried one more time. Let someone else lead this. You're in no condition. Doc, I respect you. You saved my life. But right now, I need you to let me do my job. Trevor's voice was gentle but firm. Get your medical equipment ready. We're going to be bringing injured people out and they're going to need help. Velix wanted to argue further, but they recognized the futility. Instead, they moved to set up a triage area with Nurse Krill, preparing for the casualties they knew were coming. Trevor and his team entered the collapsed structure through a gap in the twisted metal. Velix watched them disappear into the darkness, their helmet lights bobbing as they moved deeper inside. The waiting was agonizing. Every creak of metal, every settling sound from the wreckage made Velix's crystalline structure tense with fear. First victim located, Lucy's voice came through the comm system. She had stayed outside, coordinating the rescue from a safe position. They're bringing him out now. Two workers emerged carrying a Karathi male between them. He was unconscious, his scales torn and bleeding. Velix and Nurse Krill rushed to his side, immediately beginning treatment. The injuries were serious but not fatal if treated quickly. Second victim coming out, Lucy reported. This time it was Trevor himself who emerged, supporting another Karathi worker who was conscious but unable to walk. Trevor's face was pale, covered in dust and sweat. His sling had been removed, and Velix could see fresh blood seeping through his uniform at the shoulder. He's got a fractured leg, Trevor said, helping Velix ease the worker onto a stretcher. Possible internal injuries. Fell about 10 feet when the scaffolding gave way. Your shoulder is bleeding, Velix observed. Trevor glanced down at it like he hadn't noticed. Yeah, I tore something when I was lifting debris. It's fine. One more person still in there. He turned to go back inside. Velix grabbed his arm, feeling the tremor of exhaustion running through the human's body. Trevor, you're at your limit. Let someone else. It's Mason, Trevor said quietly. He's been my crew chief for 3 years. He covered for me when I was sick last year, worked double shifts so I could take time off. I'm not leaving him in there. Before Velix could respond, Trevor pulled away and disappeared back into the wreckage. The doctor felt a wave of helpless frustration. Humans were impossible. Absolutely impossible. The minutes crawled by. Velix treated the injured Karathi workers, but their attention kept drifting to the collapsed structure. The other rescue team members had emerged, reporting that Trevor had sent them out so he could navigate a particularly narrow and unstable passage alone. He's found Mason, Lucy reported, her voice tight with tension. But there's a problem. Mason's leg is pinned under a beam. Trevor's trying to shift it, but the whole section is unstable. If it collapses... A deep groaning sound came from the wreckage. Metal screaming against metal. Then a thunderous crash as something gave way inside. Trevor. Lucy was shouting into her comm. Trevor, respond. Trevor. Silence. Velix felt their 3 hearts constrict with dread. Then through the dust and debris a figure emerged. Trevor, moving slowly, carefully, supporting an unconscious human male against his good shoulder. His injured arm hung useless at his side, clearly damaged beyond function now. Blood covered his face from a cut above his eye. He was limping badly, favoring his right leg. But he was moving. Still moving. Still carrying his crew chief to safety. Workers rushed forward to help, taking Mason's weight and lowering him onto a stretcher. The moment Mason was secure, Trevor's legs gave out. He collapsed onto the ground, his body finally admitting what his will had refused to acknowledge. Velix was at his side instantly, scanning him with practiced efficiency. The shoulder injury had reopened completely. Fresh fractures in 2 ribs. Possible concussion. Severe muscle strain throughout his back and legs. Dehydration. Exhaustion. His body had been pushed far beyond reasonable limits. Get him to surgery now, Velix ordered, their voice sharp with professional urgency. Prep Surgical Bay 3. Full trauma protocols. As they loaded Trevor onto an emergency transport, his eyes fluttered open. Mason, he managed to whisper. Alive, Velix assured him. All 3 workers are alive because of you. Trevor smiled weakly, then his eyes closed again as consciousness slipped away. The second surgery was even more extensive than the first. The shoulder joint had suffered additional damage, tearing repairs that had barely begun to heal. Velix worked with focused intensity, frustrated and awed in equal measure. This human had undone weeks of healing in a single morning, had pushed his body to complete failure, all to save others. When the surgery was complete, Velix remained by Trevor's bedside, watching the monitors track his vital signs. Nurse Krill entered quietly, bringing updated reports on the other injured workers. All stable. All expected to make full recoveries. He saved them all, Krill said softly. Even though it nearly destroyed him. Velix nodded slowly, something finally clicking into place in their understanding. Humans don't ignore their limits because they're indestructible. They ignore their limits because they value others above themselves. Their capacity for self-sacrifice isn't a biological adaptation. It's a choice. A conscious decision to place other lives ahead of their own well-being. That seems illogical, Krill observed. From a survival standpoint. Perhaps, Velix agreed. But from a social standpoint it's remarkably effective. Trevor earned absolute loyalty from his crew today. They saw him risk everything to save them. That kind of bond, that kind of trust, it makes a group stronger than any individual could be alone. Trevor stirred slightly, his eyes opening just a fraction. Doc. His voice was barely audible. I'm here, Velix said. Rest now. Everyone is safe. Good, Trevor whispered. That's good. His eyes closed again, and this time his breathing settled into the deep rhythm of healing sleep. Velix remained at his bedside for a long time, contemplating what they had witnessed. Humans were remarkable not because they were physically superior, though their resilience was extraordinary. They were remarkable because they chose to be. They chose to push through pain, to sacrifice themselves, to refuse to give up on others. That choice, more than any biological adaptation, was what made them truly exceptional. Trevor woke slowly, his mind swimming through layers of medication and exhaustion. The first thing he noticed was the quiet murmur of voices. Not the sterile silence of an empty medical room, but the soft sounds of people talking, waiting. He opened his eyes. The recovery room was full. His entire construction crew stood there, humans and aliens alike. Lucy was closest, her own head bandage now replaced with a small patch. Mason sat in a wheelchair, his leg in a cast, looking tired but alive. The two Karathi workers Trevor had pulled from the wreckage stood at the back, their scales still showing signs of injury but healing. Hey boss, Lucy said softly, noticing he was awake. Welcome back. Trevor tried to speak but his throat was dry. Someone handed him water and he sipped it gratefully. How long was I out? 2 days, Lucy answered. Dr. Velix said you needed the rest. Your body was completely exhausted. Trevor looked around at all the faces watching him. Everyone okay? Mason wheeled himself closer. Because of you, yeah. We're all okay. That's 3 lives you saved, Trevor. 3 people who are here because you didn't give up. Just doing my job, Trevor said, his voice rough. No, Mason shook his head firmly. That was way beyond the job description. You nearly died in there. We all know it. A Karathi worker stepped forward, his translator conveying his words with formal precision. In my culture, a life dead is sacred. You saved me when I had no hope. I am forever in your service. The other Karathi nodded agreement, and suddenly the whole crew was talking at once, expressing gratitude and admiration. Trevor felt his face flush with embarrassment. He had only done what needed to be done. What anyone would have done. But looking at their faces he realized that wasn't true. Not everyone would have gone back into that collapsing structure. Not everyone would have pushed past pain and injury to save others. That was a specifically human thing, maybe? Or maybe just the right thing regardless of species. Dr. Velix entered the room, their crystalline form reflecting the overhead lights. I'm glad to see you awake, Mr. Dixon. But this room is too crowded for a recovering patient. Everyone except immediate family needs to leave. The crew filed out reluctantly, each person stopping to say something to Trevor on their way past. Words of thanks. Promises to visit again. When they were gone, only Lucy remained. She counts as immediate family? Trevor asked, managing a weak smile. She refused to leave, Velix said simply. And I've learned that arguing with humans is generally pointless. Lucy grinned. You're learning, Doc. Velix ran another scan over Trevor, checking his vital signs and healing progress. Your shoulder required complete reconstruction this time. The damage was extensive. You're going to be in recovery for significantly longer than last time. How long? Trevor asked, though he suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Minimum 3 months before you can return to any kind of physical work. And that's assuming you actually follow medical advice this time, which I sincerely doubt. Trevor winced. 3 months. The Habitat Ring project would be way behind schedule. Who's running the crew? Mason is supervising from a wheelchair, Lucy said. And I've taken over as acting foreman. We're managing. The important thing is that you focus on healing. Over the next few days, Trevor received an unusual number of visitors. Not just his crew but medical staff from all over the station. Doctors and nurses from different species who wanted to meet the human who had walked off injuries that would paralyze their own people. They asked questions about pain tolerance, about human determination, about how his species could function through such trauma. On the 5th day of his recovery, Dr. Velix came to his room with a request. The station commander wants me to give a lecture on human psychology and physiology, to help the medical staff here understand how to better treat human patients. I was hoping you might be willing to participate. Trevor shifted in his bed, his shoulders still immobilized. What would I need to do? Just answer questions. Share your perspective. Help them understand what drives humans to push past their limits. Velix paused. I'm beginning to understand it myself, but hearing it from you would be more effective. The lecture took place in the station's main conference hall 2 weeks later. Trevor sat on the stage next to Dr. Velix, his arms still in a complex brace but otherwise looking reasonably healthy. The room was filled with medical personnel, and the lecture was being broadcast to other stations throughout the sector. Velix began with the medical data. Scans and charts showing Trevor's injuries, both the original accident and the damage from the rescue operation. The audience reacted with predictable shock at the severity of the trauma and the speed of his recovery. But the physical resilience is only part of the equation, Velix explained. What makes humans truly remarkable is their psychological approach to injury and pain. Mr. Dixon, can you explain what was going through your mind when you went back into that collapsed structure? Trevor considered the question carefully. I wasn't really thinking about myself. I was thinking about Mason, about the Karathi workers who were trapped. They were my crew. My responsibility. The idea of leaving them there, of giving up on them, that wasn't an option. Even though you knew it could kill you? A Vexani doctor asked from the audience. Even though, Trevor confirmed. Because what's the point of surviving if you abandon the people who depend on you? Humans have a concept we call duty. It means you do what needs to be done even when it's hard. Even when it's dangerous. Especially then, actually. Velix added, this is what medical professionals need to understand about humans. They are not superhuman. They feel pain just as acutely as other species. They can be injured, disabled, killed. But they have an extraordinary capacity to choose to continue despite these factors. They prioritize duty, loyalty, and the welfare of others above their own safety. The lecture continued for over an hour. Trevor answered questions about human pain management, about the cultural values that shaped human behavior, about the psychological strategies humans use to push through difficult situations. He talked about Earth, about growing up on a planet that was constantly trying to kill you, about learning that persistence was the key to survival. Near the end, a young Rillian doctor asked, how do we treat human patients effectively if they refuse to acknowledge their limitations? Trevor and Velix exchanged glances. Then Velix said, we're actually developing protocols for exactly that purpose. Mr. Dixon has agreed to help create a training program for medical staff working with humans. Over the following weeks, Trevor and Velix worked together on the training materials. They created guidelines for assessing human pain levels, since humans often understated their discomfort. They developed strategies for convincing human patients to accept necessary rest and treatment. They outlined the psychological factors that drove human behavior and how to work with those factors rather than against them. Sella, the young Rillian who Trevor had encouraged during his first recovery, assisted with the project. She had made remarkable progress in her own healing and had been inspired to study medicine herself. She brought a patient's perspective that balanced Trevor's human viewpoint and Velix's medical expertise. The key is understanding that humans respond to logic and duty, Sella explained during one planning session. Trevor convinced me to do physical therapy not by being gentle, but by showing me that I had a responsibility to try. That same principle applies to getting humans to accept treatment. Appeal to their sense of duty to their loved ones, to their crew, to their own future selves. 3 months after the rescue operation, Trevor was cleared for light duty. His shoulder would never be quite the same, Velix warned, but with proper care it should function normally. Trevor returned to the construction site, supervising rather than doing heavy physical labor, exactly as the doctor had ordered. On his first day back, Lucy pulled him aside. The crew voted on something while you were recovering. We want to name the new habitat ring after you. The Dixon Ring. As thanks for what you did. Trevor felt his throat tighten with emotion. That's not necessary. I was just doing my job. See, that's exactly what makes you worthy of it, Lucy said, smiling. You genuinely don't understand why we think you're a hero. 4 months after Trevor's second surgery, another human arrived at the medical station. His name was Peter and he worked in the engineering section. He had suffered severe burns on his arms and chest in a plasma conduit accident. "It's really not that bad," Peter was telling Nurse Krill as Trevor and Dr. Velix arrived. "Just some minor burns. I mainly came in because my supervisor insisted." Velix examined the burns and turned to Trevor with an expression that, on a crystalline face, somehow conveyed exasperation perfectly. "Second-degree burns covering 30% of his body. He calls this minor." Trevor grinned despite himself. "Welcome to the station, Peter. I'm Trevor. Let me give you some advice. When Dr. Velix says you need treatment, you need treatment. Trust me on this. I learned the hard way." Peter looked between them, seeming to recognize something in Trevor's tone. "You're human too. You get it?" "I get it," Trevor confirmed. "But here's what I've learned. Being tough doesn't mean ignoring injuries. It means knowing when to push through and when to accept help. Right now you need help. Let them treat you properly." Peter considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay. Yeah. You're right." Velix began treating the burns while Trevor stayed to talk with Peter, explaining what to expect during recovery, offering encouragement and realistic advice. It was strange, Trevor thought, how much had changed in just a few months. He had come to this station as just another construction worker. Now he was part of something larger, helping build bridges between human and alien understanding. That evening, Dr. Velix sat in their office and opened their personal log. They had been keeping detailed records of their experiences with human patients, and tonight felt like an appropriate time to add a final summary entry. Personal medical log, Dr. Velix recording. "After months of treating human patients and working alongside them, I believe I finally understand what makes them unique. Humans walk off injuries that would paralyze other species not because they are physically superior, though their biology is remarkably resilient. They endure because they possess an unbreakable will, a determination that transcends physical limitations. They are shaped by their harsh world, yes. But more than that, they are shaped by their choices. They choose to value others above themselves. They choose to push past pain in service of duty. They choose to continue when any rational being would stop. This makes them dangerous, reckless, and difficult to treat. But it also makes them extraordinary. In Mr. Trevor Dixon, I have seen the very best of what humanity represents: courage, self-sacrifice, and an absolute refusal to abandon those who depend on him. Other species may be stronger, faster, or more intelligent. But I have never encountered another species with quite the same combination of resilience and compassion that humans possess. They are Deathworlders in the truest sense, but they use their strength to protect rather than to dominate. I consider it an honor to have treated Mr. Dixon, and I look forward to working with more humans in the future. They have much to teach us about the power of will and the strength of the spirit." End log. Velix closed the file and looked out the window at the construction site beyond. Tomorrow they would continue working on the training protocols with Trevor. There would be more human patients, more challenges, more opportunities to learn. And Velix found, surprisingly, that they were looking forward to it. Humans were impossible, frustrating, and absolutely fascinating. And the galaxy was better for having them in it.